EdSat. Um, Without taking too much of our time, so I'm currently a cloud platform engineer at BGSS UK, and today I'll be talking about how to get started in the cloud, in DevOps and cloud engineering space. So thank you, Tolu, for helping with the slides to share your screen. Thank you so much. So I'll be starting with how do we get started with cloud and with DevOps and cloud engineering. So Tolu, if you move to the second slide, please. So I've noticed that people generally confuse these two terms. People say, "Oh, I'm a DevOps engineer," and then when you look at their day-to-day activities, they're actually doing things that tend towards like, cloud engineering. And then some people tell you they're cloud engineers, and they do a combination of DevOps and cloud engineering. So I think there's a fundamental issue with the industry because there are some jobs that you would see adverts online, and they tell you who they're hiring a DevOps engineer, and when you see what they've listed things that a cloud engineer would do. So it's actually a lot for one person to combine these two roles. However, you can have your skill. I mean, you can have skills that can do both of these roles. So I'll be explaining what DevOps is and what cloud engineering is, so that we can understand more about it for those that want to get into it. So sorry, next slide, please, too. Okay, so what is DevOps? So DevOps is actually a way of doing things. It's not it's a combination of development and operations. So I know that many people have heard DevOps engineer, but I think they've not really heard much about cloud engineers. So I'm not sure if everyone here is actually quite familiar with software development lifecycle. But when when you're developing softwares, you tend to try to push your code to a repository that houses all the data for the team, and then you publish it onto a server where it goes live, and other people from different countries, pardon me, can actually access it. So in a situation where you have sprints, you know that, oh, you're deploying this, you're deploying that, to ensure that when you're making improvements, you don't just tell your customers that, oh, sorry, within 10 to 5, our server is going off, and then you tend to lose money. So that is the solution that DevOps actually tries to bring. So what DevOps does is, for every software improvement that you're making, you can actually deploy them and go deploy them to production without having any downtime. It helps you to deploy or to integrate new fixes into your production environment seamlessly without your customers noticing that you've done too much, or without a company losing money. And then what is cloud engineering? Cloud engineering actually involves building cloud infrastructure. I mean, for people like me that come from a non-technical background, like studying English, studying chemistry in university, they would not really know where software lives. People just want to get into tech, and they understand that we write code. I want to start coding. That's what people say. But when you're done coding, where exactly do you put this code so that people from Albania, people from France, people from Niger, people from Cameroon can actually access it? It stays on the server, right? And most companies, when they started out, they had to get like computers, servers, to house the software that they've deployed or they've created. But the cloud providers, the major cloud providers, they've seen a gap that people can't keep on buying servers and having data where and having their servers in their offices. It's not really feasible, and it doesn't make a lot of sense. So they decide to step in to say, we're going to offer this to you as a service. You don't have to bother about you're a small company trying to build a mini Facebook in the corner in Nigeria, and then somebody from, say the UK sees your website and they're really impressed and they tell everyone in their community, and you have lots of traffic, then you want to scale, you want to ensure that you're able to serve the number of users that are visiting that your website. You need to ensure that you have a server actually that can actually take the traffic that is coming, else you have downtime and you'll not be able to serve them as you should. So this is what cloud engineering does. So the cloud providers have actually come together to say we're going to provide this thing to you as a service. As I've said earlier, what DevOps does is actually to help you ensure that every improvement you make to your software, you can actually deploy them to production environments without having a downtime, without losing money, and without your customers even actively knowing that you're making improvements. Although you can actually let them know that, oh, we're doing this at this time, but DevOps actually makes it easier. It ensures that you're continuously deploying things, you're continuously making improvements to your software. DevOps just makes improvements easy. But cloud engineering, on the other hand, helps you to build cloud infrastructure. Rather than having to buy multiple servers that you have physically in your office, the cloud providers have actually sorted this for you. They provide that to you as a service. You just log on to a cloud provider such as AWS and you deploy, and you create an infrastructure, a server, a virtual server where your software would live on. Could you move to the next slide, please, Tolu? Okay, so how do you get started in cloud? So without further ado, I don't want to bore us with so much talks about DevOps and cloud engineering, because I mean you could learn both, because most companies would really appreciate people that have both skills. But to be honest, it's actually a lot for one person to want to do both, learning DevOps and then cloud at the same time. So how do you get started in cloud? Like I said, we have cloud providers such as AWS and Azure. Many people have heard about AWS, they've heard about Azure. It's interesting that even IBM has a cloud offering, and we have Alibaba Cloud as well. How do you get started? For me, if I would go back to learning cloud all over again, I would say that the first thing you have to really do is to prepare your mind. The cloud space, it's still growing. You can't do away with cloud for now. You can't. Within the next 10, 20 years, we're still going to see advancements in the cloud space. So before you can get started in cloud at all, you need to have a mindset of learning. Ensure that you have a passion for learning, because if you think, oh, I can just learn a little bit now and then start working, it wouldn't work that way. Because when your company says, oh, we're moving to Azure today, and then you're like, why are we moving to Azure? I mean, we've always been using AWS anyways. They would have a reason for that. So that would mean that you need to learn more about Azure. And then if they say, oh, there's this nice thing on Google Cloud that we need to add to our infrastructure, you would have to learn that as well, so that you can give enough value to your company for what they're paying you. So you need to have a lifelong learning mindset. So ensure that once you've made a decision to get into cloud, there is no stopping with learning. And this is because cloud providers themselves, they make improvements to the offerings that they are giving to people. They know that companies want, AI today, and then they want speed, they want increased CPU, they want to improve so that, many people can, come to them. There is a competition between the major cloud providers, which are AWS, Azure, and GCP. And then because of that, you have to learn a lot of things. And also requirements can change. For instance, when I was starting out, I thought I was gonna, end up in a small company where I would make changes. And I mean, let me say, fortunately, I ended up in a consultancy where I have to work with like different companies that have different problems that we have to solve. So they may have a requirement today, and tomorrow they have another requirement. And the interesting thing is, a new requirement that they would have, I may not have done that before. So I have to sit and then learn that anything I need to learn in order to fulfill the requirement. And then I'm giving that company value. So those are the two things. Ensure that you have a lifelong learning attitude because learning never ends when it comes to cloud. It's still in its growing phase. So you have lots to learn, unlearn, and relearn. And also another thing that you have to do is ensure that you have troubleshooting skills. I know that there is a lot of answers on Stack Overflow for software developers. Well, let me say, unfortunately, now for cloud engineers and DevOps engineers, aside the Azure DevOps community for DevOps engineers, I've not really seen a large community for DevOps engineers, and then a couple of answers for say Azure on Stack Overflow. For AWS, it's still quite popular. You would see like you'd see videos, YouTube videos that people say, oh, this is how to deploy this on AWS. But the interesting thing is they are teaching the basics on even YouTube. They're not teaching what you would most likely want to implement in the production environment. So if something goes wrong in a production environment, you need to be able to troubleshoot that. I believe that everyone, when we're starting out, we want to get to a level where we are like seniors in our career. So if you don't try to ensure that you have troubleshooting skills, you learn. I mean, there are a lot of things that you were not born with and you picked up along the way when you're growing up. So troubleshooting skills as well. You need to be able to look at things and say, oh, this was not there before. You need to be able to try multiple things to say, this is how this thing behaved. So if I try differently, it should behave differently. So you should be able to note that these things would, change based on, different approaches or different ways of applying them. And I would like to use, something that happened to me at work recently as an example. I was deploying something and I was just doing a dry run. I was not even applying my changes at all using Terraform. And then when it looked okay. My code was very fine. And when I deployed to create that infrastructure, everything went wrong. And then I was like, I looked at my code and I was like, this thing looks okay. I did the dry run. And to be honest, everybody looked at it and said that. We were like, oh, you wrote a nice code and that's fine. And then we had to look into the errors. So for cloud engineering, you need to prepare your mind and you need to learn. Go online. How can I learn how to look at errors? How can I learn how to fix issues? So you need to be able to fix issues. That one issue I had that day, we saw that the only issue was that we created a policy where we needed our VPNs to our virtual networks, to pair each other. VPN for different resources have to pair so that they can communicate. And because it was already set in a way, it destroyed that VNet pairing and everything went wrong. If we had not noticed that, we would be stuck for so many days and everyone on the team would get blocked. So before you even get into cloud at all, before you even get started, know that you would keep learning. Because you have to go to Google, ask Google. If you have to go to ChatGPT and copy a code and say, ChatGPT, please explain this code to me. That's still something you're learning. You're not lifting someone's code into yours. Whether you like it or not, it's either you're actively learning or you're passively learning. You're learning something. You should be able also to identify errors. Why has this thing gone wrong? My code looks okay, but why is it not working the way I expect? So those are two things you need to put your mind on. Another thing you need to do is learn scripting. So Python is actually one of the most preferred languages when you want to get into cloud. And I would not, many people say that, oh, when you go into cloud, it doesn't require any coding skills. I wouldn't really agree with that because anything can happen. You can be given a ticket where you have to fix an issue where you have to go into a server remotely to see why something is not going wrong. And you would need a scripting language to actually dig into that issue. So you need to learn a language like Python. And also another reason why I would recommend Python is because Python is easy to learn. And most companies prefer it as well. PowerShell and Bash is also, they're also scripting languages that you need to learn. You need to learn these three. For me, I would say it's preferred. You can, go online and say, oh, you prefer probably Go or something. That's, people have their preferences. But for ease, if you don't want to, just jump into too many things at the same time, I would say pick up Python. And then you can't overlook Bash and PowerShell. Another thing you have to understand is computing fundamentals. So, because you're dealing with virtual servers, these servers, I mean, they're also like physical computers, well, physical servers, I mean, that live in someone else's space. It's just the only difference is just that they don't live in your office. They don't live in, say, imagine First Bank as like a huge, compound or a huge building where they have servers, and then they are migrating onto the cloud. The only difference between what is happening, their migration, is that they've decided that everything we've stored on these physical servers in First Bank head office, we are migrating them to AWS cloud offering. These things will still live on the server. However, the only difference is the servers are in AWS environment, like they're in their office, or probably what they call them, data centers. That's what AWS calls them. So that's the only difference. You need to know what servers are like. It could be just going online to, check what are servers like. Show me like an example of a server. And then you need to know the CPU, the storage. You need to know these basic things about, hardwares. You need to know what networking is. You need to understand how data travels, uptime. Networking, for me, I would say, before you go into cloud, even if you decide that, okay, you're not committed to lifelong learning, you're not committed to troubleshooting skills or scripting, you just want to jump into cloud, right? You cannot overlook networking, because it is fundamental for cloud. Like, different resources need to communicate. You want to have, you want to build for Nigerians alone, fine. You may not need probably content distribution network like edge computing. But if you're trying to reach like Nigerians in Canada, you need to have a situation where once a Nigerian in Canada visits your website, every other person that visits that website again, there's something we call content distribution network, where it caches every information that once one person visits that information, every other person from that location, they're able to see it, and it reduces your cost. So these things will communicate with they will communicate with networking generally. So you need to understand networking. I know many people would say networking is hard, but I would say that networking is interesting and it makes your life easier when it comes to cloud. So these are just like basics. I mean, we've not even scratched the surface, but you need to have on your mind that you need to be committed to lifelong learning before you get started in cloud at all. You would keep learning. You need to have troubleshooting skills, because some things would not work the way they ought to. You may even go to Stack Overflow and someone says, oh, I had this issue before and this was how I solved it. And then you see the answer clearly and you try to replicate it on your environment and it just doesn't go well. You need to be able to look deep into it and identify the errors and try to fix it. You need to learn scripting. For those that want to go into cloud engineering, as I mentioned, it's just cloud engineering is building infrastructure. You need to learn Python, because how would you want to go into cloud engineering and not know what an array is, not know when you merge two different objects, not know how, data types and how they perform when they are merged, when they are queried? That is a no-no. You need to actually learn scripting. And you also need to learn computing fundamentals. How do software get installed on servers when you deploy them? As a DevOps engineer, when your software developers are developing their the software, how do you ensure that this development lifecycle process is seamless for them, and then every bit and piece of software that is deployed lives the way it ought to on the infrastructure that you're deploying it to? You don't even know. I mean, do you install antivirus? I mean, well, I believe that's not the case with cloud, but you need to understand these things. It's just this four things that I've just mentioned. They're not all that difficult to learn, but there are things that would make your life easier as you go into cloud. Tolu, could you move to the next slide, please? Okay, thank you. So, lifelong learning, scripting, that's all fine. But one mistake that many people make, and what frustrates most people, is they try to go to Google and then try to learn things on their own, thinking, oh, I don't want to spend a lot of money, or I want to just spend money on Udemy courses. You would not go far that way, and it would make your cloud journey very frustrating. You would definitely be frustrated. So I would recommend that you get additional training. For myself, I would say that learning with a company, I actually have a company that I learned, cloud from, and that actually helped me a lot. There are different cloud providers. There is AWS, there is Azure, there is GCP, there is IBM, Alibaba Cloud. There are a whole lot that I cannot even mention, and that even I have not explored before. So how do you know which one to start with? You're trying to learn AWS. You see a company that is putting out a job advertisement, and they're saying, oh, they want an Azure person, an Azure ninja, or they want somebody that has done something related to data on GCP. How do you know which one exactly to focus on? If you don't get a specialized training that helps you to streamline what you need to learn, the basics that you need to learn in cloud, you would get really frustrated. And with these cloud providers, they have their different shares when it comes to the cloud ecosystem. Like, some people prefer AWS, some people prefer Azure, some people prefer GCP for different reasons. And the truth is, these cloud providers, they don't know it all. They're not 100%. There are some offerings on AWS that are way better on Azure, and there are some offerings on Azure that AWS cannot match up with at all. So you need to know, why do you want to get started with AWS? The specialized training that you would get would actually help you with that one. They would be able to take you on a journey that would say, okay, we want you to start with AWS. Why? Because it's easy to learn. And, it's used by, say, 60% of people that use cloud anyways. Or when they say, oh, we want you to learn a little bit of AWS, they will teach you a little bit of Azure because you want to be a multi-cloud engineer. So you need to be able to get additional training that helps you to identify that. And another thing is infrastructure as code. So many people think that they want to learn cloud, they can just learn AWS and they start applying for jobs. It doesn't work that way. So imagine a company like Facebook. When they started out, they'll probably have, like, you know, they will probably have, say, one server that serves them because they don't have too much traffic. They don't have too many people that are visiting their website, right? But imagine when they scale up to 1 million users that use Facebook every single minute. They would need to deploy more than one server. They might decide that, okay, we don't want to use servers now. We want to use, say, Lambda. We want to use like Lambda functions. Or they may say, oh, we want to use this type of database or not. Like, we want to have like 10 databases for just storing user information. We want to have like 10 databases that does another thing. It would be very impossible for them to start clicking, just log on to Portal or Azure to try to create 10 databases at a time. It would not make sense because they would misplace a lot of things. This is where infrastructure as code comes in. And what is infrastructure as code? Infrastructure as code helps you to write code to deploy these cloud resources. If you want to deploy an S3 bucket that takes images from people, say Jamb decides that they want to, ensure that they have pictures of students that have come to register on the Jamb portal, they can decide that we want to have S3 buckets that will store these images. Imagine Jam saying, oh, somebody should just log on to, AWS and just create an S3 bucket and give up the endpoint or the URL. It wouldn't make sense. That would be a total disaster because, one, they need security. They need to be able to ensure that this S3 bucket communicates with another resource such as a server, or anything they wanted to communicate with, and it would be impossible to start clicking these things on the website. So they will need infrastructure as code to write these things. And that also takes us back to, where I said to learn scripting. Python opens you up to learning things, to learning how to write code. It makes your life easier when you start writing things like Terraform. I put Terraform at number one because it's one of the most preferred infrastructure as code that is used in the industry. And it's also used for multi-cloud. For instance, the multi-cloud, multi-cloud is actually getting enough attention these days because people have realized that we may like AWS, but GCP might have something really nice that AWS does not have. So how do we ensure that that this one thing that we have on GCP that we like, we can implement it even though most of our infrastructure is on AWS? This is where Terraform comes in. Terraform helps you to write that code where you can identify which providers you want to use. So it makes it easy for you to bring these providers together and then deploy onto their different, environment seamlessly. That's what Terraform does for you. And ARM, ARM templates actually, as they're called, is actually native to Azure. I've not explored that before, but I've heard people say a lot of things about it that is good and all. And also CloudFormation. CloudFormation is also another infrastructure as code tool that you can use to deploy to the cloud, but it's owned by AWS. So ARM is used by Azure, and CloudFormation is used by AWS. So this is why I also said again that Terraform is actually most preferred, because ARM would definitely limit people to Azure, pardon me, and CloudFormation will limit people to AWS. So to conquer the limitations, people tend to use Terraform because it makes it even easier because you can read your code and see what you're deploying. So yes, infrastructure as code, as I said, to deploy resources onto the cloud. And then that's for cloud engineers actually. And then for DevOps engineers, like I mentioned, that it's about DevOps engineering is actually about ensuring that you have continuous integration and continuous delivery and continuous deployment into your cloud environment and resources. What a DevOps engineer will most likely be focused on are the DevOps tools. We have Azure DevOps, where you have to create like pipelines. You cannot want to, upload your software that you've created and just want to use a zip file and now move it onto a server. It doesn't make sense. You definitely have pipelines that says, oh, you can link it with GitHub or Bitbucket, where once a pull request has been made and merged onto main, trigger it such that when a test has been written, I mean, and I know Jenkins does that a lot. Like there are so many test suites on Jenkins. That's why some people prefer Jenkins, where you can write tests and then it checks them to ensure that the softwares that you've created, they are of high quality, and then you have no issues with them. So as a DevOps engineer, you most likely be focused more on DevOps tools. You have, aside Azure DevOps and Jenkins, you have like Ansible. So I'm so sorry, I forgot to actually add that to say Ansible. So for a tool like Ansible, what Ansible would do is, like I mentioned the case of Facebook the other time, that when they started out, they may have like say one server, but as they scale and have like more users, they'll have like 10 servers. So when you're creating your servers, you have some things that you have to install. It's just the way you buy your laptop, and then you have like an operating system on it, like a Windows operating system, and a server as well. It would have an operating system, and it will have some things that you need to install so that when you start it up, it behaves the way it ought to behave, and then it takes the software the way it ought to take it, and then your deployment is seamless. As a DevOps engineer, you need to be able to use Ansible. I mean, there are different companies with different, what's it called, with what they want, well, their preferences, as I would say, with different preferences on how to configure things on different servers. So if you have 10 servers that are for front end alone, and then you want to make an improvement, or you want to, upgrade some things on these servers, it's very impossible for you to start clicking your servers. And it's impossible for you to start using infrastructure as code again. This is where Ansible comes in. Ansible helps you to install what you need to install on these servers. Infrastructure as code, like Terraform, which I use every day, is good for creating these environments, these servers, these data bricks, these Lambda functions. Is good for that. But Ansible is used mostly by DevOps engineers to make improvements. What DevOps engineers would do is just to make improvement. They're not involved in building infrastructure. They don't care about, this is what a server will require to, to come on. This is how this server should communicate with this S3 bucket. They don't care about that. What they know is once you've created this infrastructure for us, thank you very much. We only need to maintain the infrastructure, and we only need to, ensure that the software that is being created gets deployed there seamlessly. So you have to understand DevOps tools as well. And then when you're done getting your training, I would advise that you take a certification. If you are from a non-technical background, you need to take a certification, because people would assume generally that, oh, how long have you been in tech for? Do you know networking? If I meet someone who is a network engineer today, my first advice to them would be, please get into cloud, because it is easy for them. They've been in the tech space and they understand how, how things communicate a lot. So for you from a non-technical background, take a certification. One, for yourself, not necessarily for a recruiter or for an employer. For yourself, it gives you a sort of confidence that, oh, I know these things. And then these are not exams that you take and you think you can cheat. You have someone that is watching you closely. So you need to take a certification. It helps you to boost your confidence. So I would generally recommend cloud practitioner exams for AWS. That's the first stage. And then for Azure, it would be AZ 900. So you can start with that. But that's after you've completed, like, cloud modules with AWS or Azure, or, any GCP exam. You can take their most basic exam as well. So you need to take a certification to boost your confidence. And then when you're sure that, you've had enough knowledge, you can now take it a bit higher and say, write a solutions architect exam for AWS to prove to recruiters that I don't only know cloud concepts, but I've been able to, ensure that I know how to architect cloud resources such that I can recommend to a new company, that this is what fits the problem that you have. So they see you as not just having just basic knowledge alone, but trying to be a specialist in probably any of the cloud providers that you've chosen. So it's important that you get additional training. That's just like the bottom line for this part. Please don't try to learn anything about cloud on your own. And then the next thing would be to solidify your knowledge. You've come to a space where you understand that you need to keep learning, right? And you've decided to put yourself forward to someone that can teach you, or to probably like a school that teaches you about cloud and DevOps. How do you take it higher? Solidify your knowledge by trying things hands-on. Some people finish learning, like, say, AWS, and then take a certification before trying to deploy things to the cloud. I wouldn't really recommend that. I would say, as you're learning AWS, for the mini resources, like, say, one server that you can create, you can click on the portal, but I would advise that you also deploy with, say, infrastructure as code, so that you know what you're doing. You know how these things would, behave with infrastructure as code. You get familiar with it as a cloud engineer. And then as a DevOps engineer, I would advise that, I think Azure actually has like Azure DevOps community where you can join and see different exercises. It can just be trying to deploy a simple Hello World app onto Azure or AWS. It could just be a function app that you're just trying to deploy. It helps you to solidify that thing that you've been learning just by reading. You get better by doing things hands-on. I know that AWS is known for different exercises. They have a lot of that. You can actually go onto AWS and see different exercises that they're giving on, how to create different things. And then you can also try these things out with like infrastructure as code. And how to get better, I would say that when I was learning cloud, pair programming actually helped me, not learning alone. Having a body that I can learn with, that actually helped as well. And then I would say build a portfolio. If you're coming from a non-technical background and you want to be a DevOps engineer, show me a pipeline that you've written to deploy a simple Hello World. And then I would be willing to, consider to recruit you for a company. Like, you want to be a DevOps engineer, you've written a certification, or, well, if you decide to do that, but you don't have like anything on GitHub, you've deployed something on the portal, you don't have screenshots of when you created a simple S3 bucket alone. I mean, no one would really take you serious with that. And I would say also say join a community. This is really important because there are times that you will get really frustrated, but the more you have a community that you can talk to and ask questions, the easier your life will be. And there is no one way to do things. There are other people in your community that have encountered an issue before and would be willing to, take you on that journey on how to resolve an issue that you have. So having a community is important. And an example is Azure DevOps community, like I mentioned earlier on. So there are other communities as well. I have like mini ones that I joined that are not even Azure specific. They're just communities I see online and just decide to join that. Oh, I mean, it could be any community on Ashnode or anything at all that can just help you to get better. And also, I would say volunteer. If well, recruiters understand that the cloud space is actually new, so they would prioritize someone that has a 3 months internship on their CV over someone that has not even tried at all. I have a lot of people that have actually recommended to my company, and they would be rejected because they do not have enough industry experience. So it's really key. You can just intern with the company for 3 months. Please, it's not just for internship sake. Whatever it is you learn, you've learned for yourself and it can never be taken away from you. Please never forget that. So if you're interning at a company and they're not even treating you well, what you're getting from them is really important. And I mean, you're also making impact, right? You're also giving them value. You're also helping them to create stuff. So please, you can intern at a place and you can also help small organizations. It could just be someone that says, oh, I have an idea. I want to, have a hair business, or say I want to start producing natural hair products and I want to reach people in the UK. You can say, oh, that's fine. I can just help you to create a simple WordPress and then log on to AWS and host it on, say, a simple S3 bucket. And from there, it's part of your portfolio. You can write it there that, oh, I just, I worked with this small business to ensure that they have higher visibility by creating this S3 bucket for them and ensuring that their website is hosted with a simple database that takes, customer details. And then we integrated this payment was called endpoint or portal with it. That helps the recruiter know that this one is really hungry for knowledge and ready to go, can go extra mile. So, like I said, you have to have a mindset of a long life learning. You're never going to stop learning. Ensure you know how to troubleshoot. You would encounter lots of issues. You have a new junior that would come onto your team that would just mistakenly delete something, but you need to figure it out as a senior, right? But if you've not developed these troubleshooting skills from the onset, you would not really go far. So, have a lifelong learning mindset. Ensure you learn troubleshooting skills and scripting. Ensure you understand computing. Even your computer that is right in front of you, do you know what operating system you have? Do you know how to upgrade anything you need to upgrade on your computer? Do you know what the hard drive on your computer looks like? So you need to start from there. These things are closer to us than we think. If you're not seen a physical server before, think about how your computer works. And also get additional training. Please don't learn in isolation. Look for a cloud school or an academy that can help you, that or can teach you cloud. And the interesting thing that people forget is once you learn as small as AWS, you can transfer this knowledge to actually any other cloud provider because some of their services are similar. So you need to learn infrastructure as code as well. And you need to be able, as a DevOps engineer on this end, you need to be able to, understand what a pipeline looks like. Have you written a pipeline before? So that's also important. Take a certification, to show a recruiter that you know what you're doing. And even AWS says they recognize you and you really know what you're saying. And then solidify your knowledge by, getting hands-on experience. Pair programming with your friend, it helps you to get better. It's not too much work. Then build a portfolio, show yourself to the world. If you're shy, you need to be able to come out of that shell and put yourself out there. Have a portfolio of works that you've done. You don't have to keep raking money up on AWS or Azure, you can destroy the resources when you're done. But have you taken screenshots before you deleted them so that the recruiter can know that you've actually done what you say you've done? And if you're writing infrastructure as code, have you pushed your code to GitHub? If you've written pipelines, if you've tried to provision 2 servers as a DevOps engineer, have you been able to try to use Ansible? Do you even know YAML? So these are the things that you should really take into consideration. Try to solidify your knowledge and try to volunteer. Make sure recruiters that you've been of value and help to a company before, and then from there they can see that, oh, you can just come in as a junior engineer, and then before you know it, 2 years down the line, you're a mid engineer or a senior engineer. So that would be all from me. Thank you very much, everyone. I'm not sure if anyone has questions. Questions, anyone?
I have a question. My hand is up.
Okay. Hi, Eugene.
Hi. But first of all, I want to thank you for your very concise delivery. You've made me fall in love with this DevOps and Cloud Engineering. I'm from a non-tech background, but my question is, during your talk, you mentioned that we should not learn in isolation. So can you please tell me where can we get this training for both cloud engineering and DevOps, and is it affordable?
Well, for me, I would say that I learned from a company called Cloud Booster, but I'm not sure if Dufuna actually has that for now. But you could actually search for companies. A company that I can vouch for where I learned is actually Cloud Booster. It was a 6 months journey, quite intense. That's why I said you need to be hungry for knowledge if you want to go into cloud, and you're also from a non-technical background. So you need to go to a company that has like a track record of producing people that actually have jobs. Please don't fall for just testimonials on people's websites. Go onto LinkedIn. People have graduated from them, right? Do these people actually have jobs? Because that would be a testament of their effort. I mean, I'm a product of Dufuna today, and if you see my testimonial on Dufuna, it's because Dufuna really made me. And I would have struggled a lot if not for the knowledge of, programming and web development that I got from Dufuna. So, yeah, ensure that you go to a company or, an academy that can teach you how to get into cloud. Does that answer your question?
Well, yeah, I guess. Yes, I just have no idea of because I'll find out. I'll do my research and yes, thank you. I will do that.
Yeah, you could check Cloud Booster. They're on Instagram and they're also on LinkedIn as well. But I'm not quite sure if Dufuna actually has that offering for now.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank
Thank
you very
you.
much.
Yes, you're welcome. Oluwaseun.
Hi, good afternoon.
Hi, good afternoon.
Okay, so my question is like this. So, to what level of programming language do you have to know to be a cloud engineer or DevOps? I find myself in tech space. I've been here for quite a while.
Yeah.
Because I'm diving into cloud, but I'm not so familiar with programming as it is. Even though I'm familiar with cloud environment, I know, but still because I want to go into DevOps, I need some form of programming. So, to what level do you have to know programming to actually more like excel in this field? I had to use the word excel because they kind of work hand in hand. So,
Okay. So have you written even like a JavaScript code before?
no, I've actually not written any before. Usually,
Okay.
I'll be honest, feel lazy sometimes when I'm learning it, then I just don't it eventually. So, but I'm quite intentional now about it
Okay.
because of where I want to get to and kind of track I'm looking at. I've written
Okay.
certifications, but I need to more like
Yeah.
now work on projects and be more effective, kind of.
Okay. Okay, I understand. So I think you would have to probably start with the basics of programming. Do you know what an array is? Do you know what a list is? Do you know what an object is? So that's if you're going into cloud engineering anyways. Because for someone like me, I write Terraform every day.
Sorry,
So
I didn't hear what you said. Sorry, I missed
okay,
what you.
so I said, can you hear me?
Yes, yes, better now.
Okay, so I said, do you know, if you don't know what an array is, you don't know what an object is, you don't know what a list is, you need to know data types. That's very important if you're going into like cloud engineering, because when you want to create a resource in Terraform, using Terraform, you need to be able to, I mean, you could create resources, a resource that it's not like a lot, but imagine that you have to create like multiple log analytic workspaces like in Azure, and you have to merge that with, say, a function app. You would need to understand their data types in Terraform. So with Terraform, actually, you need to understand like data types. So that's very important. I would say you can start with Python. It would make it easy for you. You can actually start with W3 schools. And if the company you're joining does not use Terraform, they use like ARM templates and CloudFormation. I think those are written in YAML. Do you even know what YAML looks like? I think YAML is actually quite easy as well. It's like a key value, what's it called, format. So you need to know that as well. So that's important. You could learn YAML, you could learn Python, either of it too. But I would advise that, I mean, you learn both. You could start with YAML, then you could move to Python. So you need to be able to know that, because imagine for Jenkins, for if you don't want to go into cloud engineering now, you want to go into, say, Azure DevOps. You want to go into DevOps engineering. You need to know, and you want to write pipelines. If you want to write a Jenkins pipeline, you write in YAML, and then you're collaborating with several engineers. You're not writing alone, right? You have other people that are like putting in the same repo as you. So you need to be able to write it as code. Write your YAML pipeline. So you need to be able to know YAML. Try to learn YAML. Try to learn the basics of coding. Do you know how to write that? So I think you should focus on that.
Okay, thank you,
Spell
Noah.
YAML.
Sorry, could you repeat that?
How do you spell YAML? Is it
That would
Y A?
be, yes, YAML. It's yet another markup language, so YAML.
Oh, thank you very much.
Yes, you're welcome.
Yeah.
Does that answer your question, Shim?
Yes, yes, yes. Thank you. Thank you.
Yes, you're welcome. Hi, David.
Hi. Okay.
Hi.
So my question is, so we're talking about cloud and DevOps, right?
Yep. Yep.
I'm actually curious to, okay, at what points do the cloud engineering and DevOps probably intersect? I mean, it's something I think during the course when you were presenting, I got a bit confused, right?
Okay.
So at
Yeah.
the point you were referring to DevOps, at the point you were
Yeah.
referring to cloud. Okay, another question I want to ask is something related to Terraform, right?
Yeah.
So that's like infrastructure as code.
Yes.
So are you like are you saying, okay, learning Terraform, like it uses like our basic programming paradigms too?
Yeah.
We will learn JavaScript, we will learn Python, we will learn
Yep.
Bash scripting.
Yep.
Is that what also that means? Sorry, yeah.
Yes, that's correct, actually. So Terraform is, well, to be fair, it's not as complex as the way you write like some really, really complex C# or anything. That's why I said Python will make it easy for you. You just need to understand the data types. It's very readable, but you need to be able to know that when you're listing a number of servers and it says, oh, if you want to write the name of a server, it's a string, or it's a number, and then you want to merge it with something else. How will they, come together? So understanding Python will help you with that. So Terraform, you learn Terraform just the way you learn, say, any what's it called? Any language. but it's very readable. But you need to understand the basics. And
I
then
think
sorry, could you
okay.
repeat that?
Yeah, I think that will lead to like a sort of like a follow-up question, because I
Okay.
remember you mentioned Python, right? And
Yeah.
you group them into like different stuff, like where you need to use Terraform, where you need to use Python. So
Yeah.
I want to understand like okay, let's say we have a project now, right?
Yeah.
And at what point do you say you want to be using like a normal programming language like Python, and when do you need to use Terraform, right?
Okay.
Because it's do you get what I'm trying to say?
Yes, I
Like,
get what you mean. Okay, so for me now, I'm a cloud engineer, right? And then I recently had a task where I had to create like container instances, and then I needed to also create a pipeline. Listen, I'm a cloud engineer, right? And I needed to create a pipeline that would take a JSON file and upload it to these containers. And then to do that, I had to write like a Python script that does like a post request. Do you
okay.
get what I mean now? I did not foresee that would happen. I signed up to write Terraform, right? But that came up. So imagine if I didn't know at least some Python, I would have really struggled. Do you get what I mean now?
Yes, I think
So
I get it.
what the Python had to do there was just to post something to an endpoint, to a URL. That was just the only thing the Python had to do. But it doesn't mean I use Python every day. It could come up. Do you understand? Does that answer your question?
Yes, I think so. Yes. And sorry, is there like sort of like automation thereabouts, when it comes to cloud engineering? I know there's definitely stuff like that, but is that
Yeah.
what Terraform does?
Yes, that's what Terraform does. So
Automation.
Terraform just helps you to automate every what's it called? Your infrastructure rather than having to click it online. And then that's what for DevOps engineers, pipeline automates your deployment for you. So you don't have to you cannot zip up your software and go and put it on a server. So immediately you just write pipeline scripts that takes that does is an event driven pipeline. I'm not really a DevOps engineer, but the little pipeline that I write, what it does is just to create infrastructure. So I do a little bit of DevOps, just a very tiny bit. I don't do the day-to-day DevOps of shipping a software onto an environment. So there is automation as well in cloud engineering, but it may not be as much as what a DevOps engineer would do, because a DevOps engineer will write lots of pipelines. I don't do that.
Okay, I
Did I
guess.
confuse you more?
No, no, not really. So, but then I think it goes back to my first question. I just want to
Yeah.
clarify. So, at what point do, let's say, cloud engineering and DevOps actually like intersect?
Intersect.
Like really form a union?
Well, for as a sorry, do you mean like on a project or like in their roles?
Okay, in the rules generally, yes, something like that. Yeah, even as a project, I mean, let's say you are looking at
Okay.
an organization, a
Yeah.
company-wide organization, and you have to work on a project that involves using cloud, that also involves pipelines, different
Yeah.
aspects.
Okay, now, so I will give you an example. For my project, when you're writing Terraform script, actually, so when you're writing Terraform code, actually, and you're deploying to like a cloud provider like Azure or AWS, what deploys it is actually a Terraform apply. So when you apply those configuration changes, it deploys it. But we can write a pipeline code that automates that deployment such that when I run a pipeline, take this code that I've written, this Terraform code, right, from GitHub and create this resource in Azure. But it doesn't mean the DevOps engineer is concerned with that. They are not even concerned with that at all. What they have to do is just pipelines to ship software. But like I mentioned when I started speaking, some companies actually don't really know what these things are because the cloud is still like at a very new phase. Like it's not all that blown up and developed. So some recruiters don't even know. They don't know how to interview someone for DevOps engineer. They have to reach out to a more technical person to interview someone for you. So even as a cloud engineer, I still write little pipeline that deploys my Terraform code, but I'm not writing for software, and I'm not my code base that has pipelines will not be as huge as a DevOps engineer. Does that make sense?
Yes, I think so. Yes, I get that now. I get that now.
Okay. All right.
You?
I think I saw someone's hand. Olubumi.
Oh, okay.
I think I saw someone else's hand. Okay, yeah. Buki Oyetime.
Yes, okay.
Hi, Buki.
Yeah, how you doing? Yeah. I just want to confirm. No, okay, the cloud booster, I checked it now. I didn't is it the spelling? Is it the
So I
same?
think the spelling it's
But
because I checked as well.
I
So
didn't
it's
see.
CL Cloud and Booster
Start. Then it's
BOOSTA.
A. Yeah, then it's A, not ER.
Yeah.
Okay, BOA.
So
Okay.
BOOSTA.
STA.
Oh, okay, STA. Okay, thank you. Because I checked it, I didn't see anything. Then my second question, you didn't really mention much for a cloud engineer. You didn't mention
Yeah.
much about on Linux. I don't want to find out how important Linux is for a cloud engineer. Yeah.
Well, I would say on the project that I'm on now,
Yeah.
I've not really done a lot of that. That's why I said, see, you have to keep learning. There are times they will throw you into something you've never done before. Linux is important. I think
Yeah.
I have a friend that was actually doing a lot of digging into like some Linux machines,
Okay.
and I have never done that because I mean we're not doing that on my project. But if a requirement comes up tomorrow and they say, "Oh, we need you to deploy this sort of machine and that," I have to do it because I have to learn it.
Okay. Okay. So what? Go ahead. Go ahead. So go ahead.
So what you have to do is just to understand that you have to keep learning.
Okay. My next question. Yes.
Yeah.
So what's the difference between a cloud system administrator and a cloud engineer?
So a cloud engineer actually creates infrastructure, right?
Yeah.
If you don't have a physical server to host your software that you're building, you have to rely on a cloud provider like AWS. And that's where a cloud engineer comes in. They'll create that server for you remotely. That's why it's called a virtual server.
Yeah.
But like a cloud system administrator would probably have to from what I can see, maintain infrastructure, but
Okay.
they don't necessarily have to build. But I've never really seen anyone that works in that space before. So I wouldn't be able to, speak much on that role.
Okay. Then my last question,
Yep, go ahead, please.
especially in Nigeria, most
Yep.
applications you see the request for, as you said, DevOps engineer. Not knowing they don't most of them don't know the difference between a cloud engineer and a DevOps engineer. So and they list out a series of roles that you find it's difficult to even understand. So that's what I'm saying. So in such a case, how do you prepare yourself? That's it. I don't know if you get my question.
So I would say that whatever it is ensure you know it well.
Okay.
So if you know Terraform well, if you know Terraform, you know it well. And then if you know how to write your pipeline, know how to write it well. So what I would advise anyone that also wants to go into DevOps engineering.
Okay.
Okay. So pardon me, I got distracted. So what I would advise anyone that also wants to go into DevOps engineering to do is also to know these cloud providers. You're deploying software. Do you know where you're deploying it? Where you're deploying it to? Do you know the expected behavior on a server? Do you know its expected behavior if you're just shipping function code, do you know how it ought to behave? So you need to be able to know that whatever it is you've chosen, please know it well. Then from there, you can now start learning like other things on the job. And the truth is, nobody is 100% at their job. Nobody. Everyone just learns to fail forward.
Thanks a lot. Thank you.
Yes. Yep, you're welcome. Yep, thank you so much, Dux, for that. So yeah, when I said computing fundamentals, yes, so you have to learn basics, Linux, basics of networking and how the internet. So yeah, that's correct. Thank you so much.
Yeah,
David.
sorry, just to chip in. So I'm
Yep.
not a cloud expert. I just have an overview of some of these things. So when you're learning like the operating system, some of these things it's a lot easier, or not easier. It's better for you to understand it from a Linux perspective or from a Unix perspective.
Yeah.
Because what happened is Windows has made, or any user interface that has like a graphical user interface like Windows or Mac, they made it really simple and it abstracts a lot of the knowledge. So what Linux or Unix does is it breaks that down. It helps you have to understand it from the ground up. It's a lot more difficult to use, obviously, but when you learn that, it helps you to understand those fundamentals better. How actually your computer works.
Yep.
So
Thank you, Tom.
it's something that everyone needs to learn.
Yeah, okay, thanks.
Yeah.
Hi, David.
Hi, sorry if I'm asking too much questions.
No, it's totally fine.
Okay, so I think let's say if at all, like someone wants to go through this part of learning cloud engineering, and like you said, you said it's best advice you go through an academy or something like that, right? But
Yes.
let's say if at all you want to
Yeah.
like make like self-paced,
Yeah.
is there like a pathway, a syllabus, like just some self-learning? Is there some
Okay.
things you of course you mentioned some things earlier on? Is there some things that you might know, maybe you working as a developer already that you transfer in the process of learning cloud engineering? That's just my question.
Okay,
Thank
yes, you can actually. So as a developer, you already know what programming language do you write, please? Do you know? Sorry, David, what programming language do you use now?
Oh, JavaScript,
Okay.
PHP.
Okay, that makes sense. That gives you like that puts you ahead of people that don't even know anything. So what you can start with is, do you know networking? Please, it's very important. Even on my job, I had to look for a networking course. So it's very important. You have to ensure that you know networking. Then you can pick up one of the cloud providers. Please don't learn two at a time. You can learn AWS because it's quite popular, or you can pick Azure if that's what you're comfortable with. Either of the two. I would advise you start with either of the two. Then, when you're sure that you know some of these resources, you don't have to know everything, but please try to you can know some really well, have an idea of what others do. Then you proceed to infrastructure as code. You can pick up Terraform, or you can pick up CloudFormation if that's what you're comfortable with, either of them. Try to deploy one resource that you've learned on AWS using one of these infrastructure as code, right? Then when you're done with that, you can move to Jenkins that helps you to automate the deployment of these resources, or Azure DevOps. How do you write pipelines that helps you to automate the deployment of these resources just using a pull request out? Okay, I've written this pipeline, right? It should react based on a merge onto a main branch, or based on a pull request. That means
You mean the likes of GitHub Actions or
yes, makes sense. Yes, that's correct. And then if you decide to deploy 2 servers, even if you use infrastructure as code and you do not use a pipeline, right? Can you try to use like Ansible to install some things on those servers that you've created? I've heard some people say Ansible, they've tried to use like Ansible to create infrastructure or to create resources as well. I have never done that. But try to take it one step at a time. Learn a little bit of cloud. Anything on AWS or Azure. Use infrastructure as code to deploy what you've learned. Use DevOps to automate the deployment. You see, and try to use like Ansible is like an orchestration management. So it helps you to just make updates on say servers. I've not really used Ansible before. So when you've done that, you've had bits and pieces of these things, then you can now move on to taking a certification to certify your knowledge. Please don't run to take a certification. It's not as important as that knowledge that you have. You can have a certification. I mean, there are people that go to uni and they have a first class and then you ask them something and you're wondering what they know. So you have to get that first because the cloud market is really crazy. I have a colleague that actually puts on his LinkedIn that I am in the best place to work. I am not looking for anybody. It's as crazy as that. You have people sending you emails to come work for them. So they need these skills rather than certification. Try to get the skills first. Learn AWS or Azure. Use infrastructure as code to deploy it. Try to use a pipeline using DevOps like Azure DevOps or Jenkins to deploy any of this infrastructure, or even the infrastructure that you've created, like a server online. Try to write a simple Hello World app, any small app, and try to see how a pipeline will deploy it onto a server in AWS or Azure. How does it behave? So that helps you as well. Does that make sense?
Oh, excellent. Yes, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
I really appreciate that, Omolara. Thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions?
Not a question, just to thank you for everything you said. Just like I say, I've been trying that, just try to deploy. I've been using AWS Amplify. Been using so basically, just to say something that I know on AWS, there are steps, there are projects that one can easily do deploy easily by following steps, which will help you learn on how it works and how the environment works, basically, just to have hands-on knowledge. And if you now want to now move into more details or more more work for yourself, then you can now maybe go for that. But through AWS platform, you can easily get easy projects that you can easily write that can help you get more knowledge in the environment. Just wanted to add that to what you've mentioned. Thank you very much.
So I think, to be fair, it's been a while that I've actually used AWS. So I'm just trying to look for AWS exercise. I mean, so just by Googling alone, I've actually seen work on 30 plus hands-on projects. Someone dropped that, yeah. And I've heard about this AWS online skill builder. So I'm just gonna drop this in the chat. I have a cousin that's actually doing a master's degree here as well. And she has like an AWS portal where she has, sorry, bear me. I'm just gonna pop this in the chat. Oh. Okay. So you can actually click on that. There are some exercises there. AWS, you can search for AWS exercises that are free. I think about 2 years ago, AWS used to give like 1 year's free access onto AWS for you to deploy anything. But I think people have actually misused that opportunity and they've taken that off. So
It's still active.
Oh, it's still active.
So,
Okay,
so
great.
I'm actually one of those people that I used it. No, I didn't misuse the opportunity. I just eventually locked my account by open and down. But yeah,
Yeah,
that's on the side. So,
yeah.
so yes, it's still active. You can still open a 1 year account and still
Okay.
use to deploy it.
Okay, great. So you can actually do that and practice as well. And the interesting thing is, when I started learning in cloud, I learned AWS. I didn't even want to go near Azure at all because I kept screaming to anybody that could hear that, oh, AWS is really awesome. And then when I got to my job, the first project I got was Azure. It was, I could not believe it. And then I started learning Azure. And the honest thing is, I don't think I like AWS like I like Azure now. So it's you need to be open to learning anything. I don't know, maybe it's because I enjoy it, but you need to have a lifelong because you would. I can get on the project tomorrow that says GCP. I need to learn these things on GCP, and I'm cool with it because I enjoy it. So that's really important. I Bookie.
Yeah, sorry, just one more question. Can you
Yep.
just tell us briefly about your learning path so that some of us will be encouraged?
Hmm. So right from Dufuna, right? Okay.
Yes,
Let
yes.
me start with Dufuna so you would really I've had quite an interesting journey. So I think I started well after uni. I started as a program manager in a very small company. They did like coding boot camps for children between 10 and I think 17. But I needed to find somewhere to learn. And then I got to know about Dufuna. And then I learned the basics of web development and programming as well, PHP. But I ran away from Dufuna just after my graduation. I did not proceed with the internship. I wish I did because there were actually internship opportunities after Dufuna. Please, if Dufuna offers that to you, please kindly grab it with your chest. It is very important. It helps you to overcome doubts because there are times that you would feel like you don't know anything. But during your internship, even if you don't know it and they throw you into it, one way or the other, you will Google it and find that answer. And I think one of the things that talks mentioned to us during the phone at that time was the importance of Googling. That you have to know how to Google stuff. Until today, it is still true. I tried to deploy something onto Databricks yesterday, and I had to use Google. I've not used Databricks before. This is the first ticket I'm picking up with Databricks, and I had to Google it. So that's important. And after that, when I didn't go on with the internship, I tried to go to a couple of companies without structure. That really, really discouraged me. And I did not have a community to learn with. That's why I will always scream the impact of community, even if it's a friend. I have a friend from that I met during the Funa, Ndane. I think she's dropped off now. She's one of my greatest cheerleaders ever since I left Dufuna. And we are doing excellently well in our careers. We start from Dufuna as well. So have a community. If it's a friend that you can drag out of Dufuna, drag that friend out. Ensure that you have a friend that you can learn with. And I think after that, I decided to do a master's in IT management. And IT management because I noticed that I was interested in learning how to code alone, but I didn't know the impact of this coding on on companies. Why do companies decide to use software at all? Why are companies deciding to invest £1 billion? Oh, sorry, say, well, that's too much. Like £1 million in acquiring new software. Why? Because they want to have new customers, because they want to reach more people, because they want to make more impact and ensure that these books that you can sell on Amazon can be ordered from Nigeria. That's why they want to invest. So I decided to do that. And the interesting thing is I didn't even really learn anything about cloud during my master's. I did a dissertation on um electronic health records in Nigeria. I noticed that when I was moving houses, like leaving when I left Ife, because I finished from Ife to Ibadan, nobody had my health records. I was just jumping around. So I decided to do to do a dissertation on that to see how that can be solved. That was when I learned a bit about cloud stuff. Oh, you can create servers to reduce, cost because Nigerian politicians won't really want to drop too much money to buy physical servers and have like an office where those are stored. So I said, oh, cloud is good, right? And then I designed and I had to write like I had an architecture, just a very simple one on how to implement that. I didn't even know I was doing cloud then. Then I met the founder of Cloud Booster, and she was like, "Oh, I do. I mean, what are you doing in the UK?" And I was like, "Oh, I just finished my masters. I did my dissertation in this and that." And she was like, "Oh my God, I mean, that's cloud, anyways. We have a boot camp for 6 months if you want to come join us and learn." And that was how I got to learn cloud. And after that, I didn't leave them because I learned from my earlier mistake running away from Dufuna. I interned there after. And it was that internship that got me a job. And the truth is, I remember when I got my offers, I got an offer from Tesco, one of the largest retailers in the UK. And during my interview with them, the recruiter told me and said, man, you know what you're doing. Like, you know what you want. And it's because I learned from my previous mistakes. I didn't take that offer. I went with the consultancy offer, which is where I am now, because I get to work on different projects, like different problems. I see how they are solved and I learn from that. Lifelong learning. So I took the mistakes I made earlier and learn from it and ensure that I'm not making them anymore going forward. So that's my journey. Now I work in a consultancy as a cloud engineer and I'm loving it.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.
That's all.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you so much, Omolara. Do we have any questions? I think we've shot beyond our time here. Okay, I think this is it. Thank you for such a deeply insightful session, and I must say that it was very motivating as well. It was very motivating as well. Thank you very much for responding to our call. We're glad and really honored to have you. Thank you everyone else for joining in today. If you are new, okay, hi Tobes.
Yeah, I just want to say thanks to Lara. Yeah, I really enjoyed the session and I learned a couple of things myself. Thank you very much. Thanks for repping us and thanks for being an inspiration.
Thanks, sir.
So, yeah, Lara has told you her background. She studied English. I think what I've learned, and I think it reinforces the principles that we try to apply at Dufuna as well, is the people that tend to do well are not necessarily the ones that spring out of the box and say, well, I really want to do this. They're the people that are that are consistent. They show up every day. They have this attitude to learning. Initially, yes, they want to do well and make money, but that's not their first goal. Their first goal is to learn. So Lara is a big woman now. I'm going to visit her in Birmingham one day and buy me, chop out of our money. But I mean, seriously speaking, like I have an idea how much she turned down from Tesco, because Tesco is like one of the biggest supermarkets in the world, and their tech they pay quite well. So, but she had to make that investment, and from Dufuna to now is about 4 years, roughly, right, Clara?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So 4 years, make that investment. Things don't happen overnight. You're not going to get there in 3 months. So it could take a while, but ultimately, you'll be successful if you stay the course. It's a marathon, not a sprint. Or you could also say it's a series of many sprints. I didn't even know that her cloud engineering course was a 6-month course. And sometimes when people ask me, oh, how long is the Dufuna course? I tell them, well, people tend to finish in about 6 months. They'll say it's too long because everybody's looking for quick microwave. God when. Go on to that, everybody was saying God when, but they don't want to put the work in. So Lara, thank you very much for sharing your story. I think it's really very inspirational. And I think we have Ndane coming up as well in a week or two. Her story is also very inspiring. She also works as a I think BI data engineer also in France. So she'll share her story as well. So we have lots of people that have done well at, gone through Dufuna, where Dufuna laid the foundation, but they built on the knowledge. So not everyone is going to be a software developer, front-end developer, but the foundation is always very good. So thanks to everyone that joined and everyone that asked questions. So I think I'll just leave it there. And Lara, I am coming to eat pepper soup. And Damian.
Yes, sir.
All right then. Thank you.
All right, sir.
All right, thank you everyone. Thank you for tuning in today. If today was your first time joining, so this is the Funa Talks. We have this session every week, every Friday, where we have interesting and insightful tech talks on different topics in tech, basically. And so it's usually this interesting, it's usually this exciting. We encourage that you tune in and you join in every now and then. That's all for us today. And like Toke said, we'll be having in Danny. Danny will be joining us on the 30th of June. That's next month. The last Friday of next month, we'll be having a talk about how Dufuna paved way in career in tech. Danny is also an alumnus of Dufuna who's doing fantastic things in tech today. So we'll be having her next month, but next week is another opportunity to join in and have a wonderful session with us. Thank you, everyone. That's all from this side today. Have a wonderful weekend ahead. Bye for now.
Thank you.